in society and in politics, especially in the view of, for example, Michelle Bachmann's husband, who was famous for supporting his pray the gay away clinics and so on. What is the view? Is that a view shared by the rest of the Tea Party, or does this happen to be just a certain faction within the Tea Party? And what's the general stance of the Tea Party on sexuality?
The social issues are far outside the province of what we're about. They're very divisive issues. They don't pertain to what we're after. Is limited government, reduced spending, smart regulation, reining the regulatory agencies. So all the social issues, abortion, gay rights, this type of thing, that's a concern to perhaps to individual members, like it is to people in this room. But as a group, that's not our mission, is to deal with it. So I really can't answer for the Tea Party.
Do you have any feedback on that?
I would agree with Lou fully on that. These things are opinions, and these are things that do tend to divide us. Emotional things, opinions. This is again why I try to encourage people to look at voting records of representatives. Those are far outside the scope.
Any other comments? You have another 2 minutes if you wish to add anything else before I let the opposition answer. You have your 3 minutes.
I would just like to respond to that by saying, to say that on one hand, government is out of control and we want to control government spending, and then on the other hand, say that social issues are way outside the province of the Tea Party, is a position that I think is indefensible insofar as much of what happens with social issues is contributed to and controlled with government purse strings. And so a wise man once said, where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. And if you want to separate, if you want to know what a nation's priorities are, take a look at how they spend their money. In a sense, the nation's checkbook is an index to its soul. And so to suggest, on one hand, that you are about controlling government spending, and yet in the next breath suggest that social issues are far outside the purview of the Tea Party's concern, to me, with all due respect, it sounds like a bit of a cop-out. It sounds like what you're saying is, we're only concerned about money, 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 but yet money is spent on all types of things related to the very social issues that you claim in your first breath are outside the scope of the Tea Party. Where your treasure is, there will your heart be. So if you're not concerned about social issues, then you shouldn't be concerned about the money either. And if you are concerned about the money, then it would seem to me that it would necessarily follow that you would be keenly interested in how the nation spends its money on the very programs that you suggest are outside of the scope of the Tea Party's interests.
And I think this may be the root of perhaps some misperceptions of the Tea Party, the reluctance of some to articulate positions on certain issues. Perhaps people are making suppositions and assumptions about the Tea Party because positions on key matters like this one are not being clearly articulated and delineated. Perhaps I want to know the opinions of members of your organization about this issue of the homosexual community, its rights, its position. Maybe I want to know before I come to a conclusion about your organization or your movement.
And how does gay rights, I'm sorry, but how does gay rights affect the federal budget?
Let me give you an example, sir. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission is part of the federal budget. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission protects members of the gay community from discrimination and from any act of discrimination. The budget of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission has been curbed and is in danger of being curbed. Cut the budget of the organization, you're cutting its ability to protect that particular minority group from discrimination, as my colleague here was suggesting.
Right.
What my colleague and I are asking about is the spending priorities of the Tea Party. We understand that you want to reduce spending. Okay, what do you want to focus spending on? What is it? What kind of programs do you want to spend on?
That's a different question. That's a different question.
In terms of
regards to overregulation and government spending, how do you consider the perpetuation of the war on drugs, especially in regards to overregulation and government spending? I don't want to bring, I know that there's a racial element into this. I'm purely talking money, regulation, economic terms.
You want to limit that to the war on drugs?
Yes. You know, how do you defend continuing the war on drugs?
Expertise in my book, and it's not on the agenda of the Tea Party. About war on drugs specifically, if I could give you an example that I just encountered in the last 18 months on regulation. A client of mine was in my office on business, and we were talking industrial products and stuff he makes. He produces specialty chemicals. Small company, 30, 35 employees, very stable company. They've come close to going out of business 1 or 2 decades ago, but tough management got them back on track. They're doing pretty well now. After we talked business, we got into these kinds of things. And, Jim mentioned that an OSHA inspector had been in to inspect his office and his plant. That's fine, that's what OSHA does. Well, it's a very small plant. The 3 rooms of the offices wouldn't even fill this area here. The plant's not too big in the back. The OSHA inspector went around the offices, went in the plant, and when she came back, she sat down in Jim's office and said, "We have 3 violations." He said, well, you can walk into any building at any plant and find something, you know, not up to snuff. But the first violation was the visitor's register that people sign in when they go into a company. OSHA says it's supposed to be on the first desk that a visitor encounters. It was on the desk like next to it. That was violation number 1. Violation number 2, in the back of the plant, there were drums of chemicals, and one of the workmen had been working, opening and closing drums, and he left the bung wrench on top of the drum. She said that should have been put back in the tool rack. Okay. Number 3, she had a bunch of shipping material weighed, you know, on a scale in the plant. She said one of those containers is 2 ounces overweight. For those 3 violations, she fined them $12,000. You know, what Jim said to me was, he said, "Lou, I just want to pay off my debt, sell this company, and get out of it." Now, if you multiply that little plan times 50 states, you have some idea what goes on with regulators. $12,000, a little company like that, and when they sell, they will go out of Pennsylvania to a big producer in Illinois or who knows where. That's just a small taste of what regulators can do when they're out of control. I'm not saying no regulation. My God, we need regulation where it's needed. But I think if it had been you or I doing that inspection, we probably would have said, hey, you know, that visitor's register is supposed to be on the first desk. Instead, it was a $3,000 fine just for that. So this is what makes people crazy.
John, thank you very much.
I'd be interested to know, Governor Corbett, in his most recent budget proposal, proposed cutting education, higher education. It was really very much directed at the Pennsylvania state system. And here at Westchester University, created quite a scare, frankly, because education levels, if the governor's proposal had gone through as it was presented, education spending would have been lower than it was 27 years ago in 1983. With that proposal comes a proposal of a $670 million increase in prison spending. And what I'm interested to know is, where is the Tea Party outrage at the increase in prison spending with the corresponding cuts to education and the refusal of Governor Corbett to levy a tax on businesses that want to tap the Marcellus Shale, and the CEOs of those businesses that are doing business in Pennsylvania taking natural resources out of our jurisdiction happen to be some of the same ones that contributed upwards of $350,000 to Governor Corbett's campaign. Where's the outrage? Because that, to me, is outrageous. That is unacceptable. I'm interested to know where the outrage is for a $670 million increase in prison spending and a corresponding decrease in education cuts that would take us to levels lower than they've been in 27 years, while CEOs of a company come here, tap the Marcellus Shale, draw from our natural resources, and don't have to pay a penny in taxes because Governor Corbett wants to be faithful to a campaign promise to people who just so happen to be large contributors to his campaign. That's an outrage.
I'd be interested.
Just to echo my colleague's sentiments here, again, I respect your opinion, sir. I hold you in high esteem for being willing to present your opinions here. But with all due respect, simply saying you want less regulations isn't enough. I think this is the problem with the misperception of the Tea Party movement. Some clarification is needed. Just how much deregulation does the Tea Party support? What regulations should be abolished? It's not enough to just say, I want less regulation. What regulation should be abolished? How much deregulation? You say you don't want to abolish government. Okay, how much government exactly do you believe should exist? We need more clarification before someone is going to perceive your movement accurately.
Concerned because his question was about the war on drugs, and you didn't address the question on the war on drugs and the stance of the Tea Party. So I'm concerned about that because the question wasn't answered, and I would like to make a statement and anyone can comment on it. Concerning the war on drugs, in 1983, nationwide, there was about 300,000 people who were in the prison system. Based on the Pew Foundation, who regularly does statistics, they noticed that in 2007, the number is more like 7.2 million people who are either incarcerated, who are on parole, who are on probation, or who are in the judicial system. A book called The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness by Michelle Alexander, who is a professor at Ohio State University and who also was a federal prosecutor for many years, talks about how the mandatory sentencing that took place under the Reagan administration is very much responsible for that jump in prison numbers. Also, they're also saying that about 40 to 45% of people who are incarcerated nowadays are incarcerated for nonviolent crimes. Many people are incarcerated for mere possession of marijuana, okay? In Amsterdam, you can get some orange-flavored cannabis with your latte, and statistically, America is incarcerating more people than Russia and China. So I think that's what he was talking about, and I would really like to know where is the outrage in that, because we're spending too much money and it's unsustainable. If you look and do just two more facts. An inexpensive inmate is about $35,000 nationwide. That is a person between the ages of 18 and about 25, 30. Older inmates who are there for long periods of time, their price tag for one inmate can run upwards of almost $200,000 because they might have dialysis, diabetic, hypertensive, heart disease, and when you're in prison, you get your food and you get your medication, okay? But people who are out here working, who are contributing to taxes, many of them can't even afford health insurance. But when you go to jail, you get health coverage, okay? So we're paying for it. So if people who are criminal get health care, then people who get up and go to work, even if they are not making a lot of money, okay, minimum wage, working poor, they should have access to health care too. So I would like to know where you stand on that, and I would like for you to answer his question about your stance on the war on drugs.
Revitalize your response. Do you have any further response on the issue of the drug war?
Yeah, I'm not up on the intricacies and the unfairnesses that are occurring with the war on drugs. I agree that the population, prison population in this country is an absolute disgrace. I don't have the answers, and evidently nobody in government hasn't either, but it's persisted for decades. I've heard people like yourself complaining about this in the newspapers, on TV. Nothing changes. Nothing changes. This administration had control of the 3 branches of government. I don't know if they've tried to do anything about it or not. I just don't know. But again, it's prison issues, drugs, the social issues are not. In any group, you have to know what your boundaries are. Just as these gentlemen here, their job is to teach. Their job is not to go out and direct traffic on the highway. So you have to set boundaries or you lose all your impact on what your main purpose is. We could individually, all of us have opinions about probably damn near everything in the world. But an organization can't do that, it has to focus.
Just respond to the woman's question back. I'll just renew my statement that where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. And the amount of money that we spend on prisons and on the war on drugs is outrageous, considering the fact that it appears that the war on drugs has failed at almost every turn. If the war on drugs had been successful, then there would arguably be less people in prison today than there were in 1984 at the beginning of the Reagan administration, when he begins to pass the Bail Reform Act and the sentencing guidelines assume their position and people start getting sent to prison for long periods of time. We spend an inordinate amount of money on that, and regrettably, and listen, I don't think you can have these kinds of discussions in this country without talking about race, because I think race is at the core of where a lot of these issues intersect. When you start talking about the expenditure of money and the expenditure of money on the war on drugs, which is clearly has been a failure because there's more people in prison today than there were 30 years ago. And again, to suggest that the expenditure of money is outside of the purview of the Tea Party, when it's the expenditure of money and government being out of control that has got Tea Party folks riled up to begin with, I just don't see how you make that distinction. I see the two as inextricably connected one to another, and I just don't think you can get around taking positions on some of these social issues when they're clearly connected to large amounts of government funds being committed to programs that seem to be failing. That's
again a reduction in spending. What precisely do we cut, where, and why, and exactly why? Why should, say, defense be cut as opposed to a social program that benefits the elderly? Why? What should be cut and why? But I think this young lady also made a point, however obliquely, that we mustn't overlook here. There are fundamental issues in this country that neither the Tea Party, liberal Democrats, or anyone is addressing. She raised the issue of narcotics addiction. Why is drug trafficking and drug addiction such a widespread problem in this country? And why are none of us talking about it? Why does this problem persist and none of us are addressing it? Neither liberals nor conservatives deal with this problem. The fact is, my wife and I will tell you, we've lived overseas in Western Europe and elsewhere for years at a time. Drugs aren't a widespread problem in other industrialized countries, but it's a widespread problem here. This is a social problem that none of us are talking about or addressing. Maybe it's time the Tea Party did start addressing social issues. Society could benefit from that. Maybe we could use some input from the Tea Party about this.
A very simple statement that the war on drugs is unconstitutional. This war on on drugs, this war on terror is unconstitutional. These are things that are not in the enumerated powers of the Constitution. And if you want any position from the Tea Party, that would be it. Anything that's not covered in the enumerated powers of the Constitution is unconstitutional, and the money should not be spent.
So does the Tea Party advocate, say, the legalization of illegal drugs? I'm not intending that as a criticism. I'm
I would
curious.
say that if you would pursue this into the bill, in anything that's not covered in the Constitution or the Bill of Rights, that it would be covered by the states. Many of these things are states' issues.
But again, so does the Tea Party believe then that states should make the decision about the legality of narcotics or avoiding narcotics?
Come on, you're trying to force an issue down her throat and you're out of line.
I'm not trying to force an issue.
Yes, you are.
I'm asking a question.
You're trying to
I'm a voter.
The war on terror, you had asked about the position on Libya. In this report card that I mentioned earlier, there is the bill spoken about the Libyan withdrawal. And if you would go and you would look at your representatives' votes on that particular issue, in relation to the Constitution, you would see that they should have voted to withdraw from Libya. And so there are many representatives out there, some vote for it, some vote against it, and that is where the average citizen, all of you, any of us, can make an impact by understanding and knowing what our representatives are doing in Congress.
Left-wing liberal, and I'm in complete agreement. I have no
Absolutely.
difference.
The war on drugs is unconstitutional. The war on terror is unconstitutional. These things, anything not covered in the Constitution under enumerated powers, is not.
But again, these are fundamental issues that we all need to be talking
That
about.
is the position of the
I'm not
Tea Party.
saying I'm opposed to the legalization of drugs, but as I often say to students, how can we visualize, say, the legalization of drugs? Am I going to go to Giant and see the wine, spirits, and crack cocaine shop? Am I going to go to Wawa and say, I'd like to have a pretzel as a Maryland? I mean, I'm not saying I'm opposed to the idea. I'm saying that we need to talk about it.
Yes, I'm sitting here listening, and I hear a great deal of dissatisfaction on many issues here. The Tea Party is a narrow organization. I think Sue has explained it well. Lou has declined to become involved in many of these issues. I think that what behooves all of you is get out and really get to know your representatives, form your own groups. Look at your issues and find people who are of like mind on your issues and work with them. Work with an issue on the prisons. Find other people who are interested. The Tea Party is an organization, a very loose organization. We study the Constitution. We have constitutional classes. We look at what is constitutional, as Sue has said. But as individuals, out of that, we belong to other organizations who have other interests. You seem to feel as if we ought to have interest in prisons and interest in where the money is spent in Iraq and Iran and all the rest of it. This is not the focus of the Tea Party. And I guess what we were hoping to do today, and being here, was to help you all to understand that it's just a very loose organization of people who believe that maybe we should be looking more closely at our representatives, looking more closely at regulations. We have a 9% unemployment rate in this country. The money that goes to the government is money taken out of the private sector. It's as simple as that. You're talking about government doesn't create jobs. Government has to tax, it has to borrow, or it has to inflate, and that's how it gets the money. So Tea Party looks at this and says maybe we should be looking at something else. But you can't dump all of these problems today on the Tea Party.
Ma'am, I respect your opinion.
We're not
I respect your opinion, but the statements you're making are broad generalizations if you want someone to support your position.
We are not going to sit here and say that as a Tea Party, we don't spend money, we don't advocate this or the other as individuals.
Your points are well taken with regard to, certainly with regard to our checking in on our representatives and knowing where our representatives stand. You and I do not differ on that, but making broad generalizations about what government cannot and cannot do, you need to elaborate and expound on this. Where are the empirical facts and the evidence and
movement is only 2.5 years old. But mostly 90% of people have never been in politics ever in their life.
That's the answer.
I respect that, sir.
No maturity.
But you cannot fault someone for being curious about your position on an issue. I mean, I don't mean any harm by asking you to fault.
I'm sorry, to me that's a question or to be asked to the panel.
When you assume a responsibility as a citizen to be involved in a political process, there's a corresponding obligation to articulate your position with some precision and clarity. And frankly, ma'am, to suggest that the expenditure of money, which is what you're concerned about, and the expansion of government, which is what you're concerned about, is different from social issues which involve the expansion of government and the expenditure of money, that position is disingenuous. I'm sorry. It is. It's indefensible.
It's not a belief, man. It's an empirical fact.
Please have just one last question, then we'll wrap up.
And if that's the case, then I understand.
All right, the question that I really want to present is this. You have the statements that Tea Party is a loosely organized group of concerned citizens, and I have to say it's amazing what Tea Party has done is informing citizens about government and governance. But bottom line is the Tea Party an actual political party? No. That is question one. Since it's not technically a political party, then does it then take on the authority to answer some of the social issues that we're asking?
You hit the nail on it.
So if we don't have the ability to ask the social issues, then what then is the, okay, and as you were saying before, since the focus then is clearly on the size of government, the lowering of taxes, constitutionality of government, the problems of overregulation and of our taxes, and lowering our taxes. My question then is, as I was talking with Clyburn about clarifying, I think a lot of people, we're interested in and we're confused about the Tea Party only because we're not too sure on, okay, if there's a delegate that is backed by the Tea Party, what does that mean?
Right.
If there's a Tea Party that, if that could be answered, if there's a representative that they say is backed by the Tea Party, then what would that representative then show? They want to push away some of these over-regulated things that you guys see, and then how much, as Dr. Clyburn said, what we need to find as students, as people that want to go out to the ballot box and become active participants in government, like we all, as we are beginning to see more people, we should be, but not. Why then are we still having these issues of clarity?
Right, very good.
Would you mind, I'm sorry, would you clarify before?
I want to know positions of, why do you think that, since, as you were saying, that the Tea Party is very loose in terms of, we can ask a group of Tea Party constituents in Pennsylvania, we can ask a group in Texas about, say, the size of government in terms of regulation. Would there be clear differences between what Pennsylvania's Tea Party and what Texas Tea Party says? And what does it mean to say that there is a Tea Party-backed candidate?
Demonstrates commitment to following the Constitution, to responsibility. I mean, this $13 trillion debt that you're all going to be paying for did not come from nowhere. It came from government. It didn't come from you, it didn't come from you folks. It came from government. Nobody else is responsible for it. Government has the power of the purse. That's why it's such a big number. That's why we are so focused on it. When we find a candidate who adheres to the kinds of principles that we espouse, that's somebody we will support, unless he's got some other issues. So there aren't many candidates who do. So.
And if I could just, again, go back to these voting records, you'll see in the past 6 or 7 months in Congress that there are, when you have the standard of the U.S. Constitution and are they voting with the Constitution, there are members of Congress that get 100%. Ron Paul, Rand Paul, Mike Lee, Jim DeMint. So when they are all compared to the same standard, that is when it becomes clear that there are candidates or representatives out there that do have the focus of constitutional principles, of limited government and fiscal responsibility. There are candidates out there that do that. And again, if you like, I have copies I can show you some of the things, and you can see the differences in how people vote and what they're voting on. And then it begins, a whole chain of questions. You begin to say, well, why and why not? And you see the money that is associated with these bills, and very interesting stuff. So again, I would say constitutional principles, enumerated powers, and the Bill of Rights are the things that the Tea Party are the most important principles of the Tea Party.
Again, I respect your opinion, and once again, I'd like to echo her sentiment that we should all be aware of what our representatives and apathetic when it comes to what their representatives are doing. We all are, regardless of our persuasion. At the same time, two of my closest friends are both constitutional scholars. One is a diehard conservative, and one is a liberal. And the one thing they both agree on is that the Constitution is open to different interpretations by different scholars and different people. It's not enough to say we've got it. Now you see, that's not a lie, sir. I'm not lying to you. I'm telling you that different constitutional scholars of all persuasions will say that. And I have no reason to lie to you at all. I'm a political scientist. I hang around these guys. Different constitutional scholars can both be conservatives and have different interpretations of the same provision of the Constitution. I deal with this.
You're stating something obvious.
Can I just say this?
There's only one Constitution.
Yeah, there's only one Constitution, sir, but there's nine Supreme Court justices, and many of them have very different opinions, whether they be liberal or conservative. Let me just say this: my hat's off to the Tea Party for informing citizens about basic principles of citizenship. I think that's very important. Most people don't have any idea what the Constitution is, what it says. Most people don't want to serve on juries. Most people don't want to vote. So my hat's off to the Tea Party for that. This gentleman here made a comment earlier, I think, that sort of under the current of what was going on, you were sort of motioning to me. And he said there's a learning curve. And since the Tea Party is just about 2.5 years old, there will be a learning curve, and there will be time for the organization to articulate its principles perhaps more closely. Let me suggest, though, and this is just my last statement, that to suggest that government expenditures and social issues are disconnected is like saying, I want to get in the pool and swim, but I don't want to get wet. If you're going to jump in the fray, and if you're going to start talking about government expenditures, you're going to have to, at some point, start to address issues that right now you might want to avoid. That's all.
And I'll echo that sentiment by saying, referring back to Spider-Man again, if you want a little bit of political power, you've got to accept the responsibilities that comes with that. And one of those responsibilities is clearly articulating positions on different issues. That way people can't stereotype you guys. People can't stereotype if you guys clarify where you stand.